Cyberpunk was the most anticipated release in recent video game history. The hype surrounding it could even be compared to Half-Life 3, the legendary piece of vaporware that proved Valve can't count to 3. And with all the delays and setbacks it faced before its less than perfect release, people were chomping at the bit trying to scratch their Cyberpunk itch. So, predictably, a lot of games with such an aesthetic came out during this period. Most of these games would range from half-baked, boring and uninteresting to bloody asset flips. But to me, Ghostrunner stood out from the bunch, and today we're here to see why.
You're alive. Can you hear me? They are already looking for you.
The very first thing I noticed when I booted up the game is that the mouse sensitivity was way too high. That would probably be the way to go if you have a lack of mouse space or an addiction to cocaine, but I have neither of those problems, so I dropped that down to half. The second thing I noticed with my now reasonably sensitive mouse was motion blur, my mortal enemy in every goddamn video game. And after touching that up, the third thing I noticed was how slide and crouch were bound to control. That would be a normal choice for a game like, say, Valorant, but it would make for one heck of a pinky workout here, considering you have to press shift to dash. Speaking of which, I should probably explain the dash, and the rest of the core mechanics, and, what the entire game is about. It's pretty much like a big cyber pie, with fillings consisting of Mirror's Edge, Dishonored, and Katana Zero. You have your shift button that not only lets you dash, but also, when you hold it, slows down time so you can make finer pre-dash movements, which you mainly use to dodge bullets. Dodging, mid-dash or not, isn't actually your only way to deal with bullets, as you can just block them with your massive katana, if you slash towards them at the right timing. Although I do think this kind of has a flaw, and that's the fact that bullets are hard to see, and therefore time to slash for, if you don't know the opponent's exact location. And I say kind of because it's really easily fixable. You just need to make the bullet animation flashier by making them spin about and adding some particle effects, which is what they've already done to a certain extent. It just needs to be amped up even more. I considered something more extreme, like adding bullet lines that would show up right before the enemy fires, but that would make everything way too easy due to the linear level-based design of the game. If it were an action game with some more chaotic elements, like randomized enemy spawns, then that would be the way to go. But as it is, most of the entertainment comes from constantly dying until you memorize the threats around you and figure out a way to deal with all of them in one fell swoop. One fell swoop of your katana, to be specific. Speaking of small but most likely intended quote-unquote flaws, the character's running is way too slow. In fact, it might be inaccurate to call it running, since with the way dash takes over the shift key, we don't actually have a dedicated key for sprint. I'm pretty certain this is an intentional decision by the dev team to make the players come up with more unique ways of moving about, like combining slide, jump and dash the way you would in a COD Zombies game. We don't have dash in COD, but you get the point. And although I still don't like just how extremely slow normal walking is, it does give a slightly stronger challenge to the speedrunning community. Oh, we'll get to that bit later. Your other methods of movement include sliding, wall running and the aforementioned plain old jumps. Combine that with the dash and you've got yourself the very basic framework of a game. There's also a good mix of environmental obstacles. We have our hacky bits, grapply bits, move-y bits, slidey bits, electro bits, fiery bits, and so on and so forth. Now, with that out of the way, we can finally talk about the enemies. You've got your basic pistol dude. They shoot at you every second or so and are generally pretty easy to dodge and block. They're like this game's version of the Goomba. Easily stompable, but can easily stomp you in return. Although the last bit does apply to every enemy in the game. Of course, one would quickly get bored of scrub stomping, so they add these shield generators to spice things back up. The shields are quite unbreakable and you can only dodge the Goomba's attacks and destroy the generators so the stomping can continue. It does get a bit ridiculous, however, when you see shield generators shielding pistol dudes, while they themselves are shielded by other shield generators, like some kind of a cursed game of cyberpunk Jenga. And so at that point, we get introduced to Mr. Machine Gun Man. He's actually a very well balanced enemy. He fires at you in a rapid burst, making sure you can't consistently dash dodge his bullets like he could with pistol. To balance this out, he has a weakness pistol didn't, the need to reload, and I've noticed how he tends to shout reloading if there's any other enemies around. Now you might be worried, like I initially was, that such an enemy would discourage risque tactics and heavily encourage taking cover for less skilled players. But that's not actually the case, because although his bullets may be undodgeable, you can still make sure he doesn't hit you if you circle around him in a spiral, getting close to inflict the finishing blow Junji Ito style. Now, we're going to stray from the order of introduction here, as the next character we meet is the Slugger, who I want to discuss a little bit later. For now, let's take a look at Shield. Not that one, no. He's kinda like Monty from Siege. He has a curvy shield that covers half of his body, and makes him unapproachable from the front, as this shield is also quite unbreakable, and will knock you back if you hit it. He also has a reload, which happens after every 3 bullets. I didn't actually notice that myself until I started writing the script, as it is a rather quick reload. Shield Dude is actually a pretty basic and fantastic building block for the level design of Ghostrunner. All you have to do is dash around him, but combining this with the other enemies makes for very interesting situations. Although oddly enough, the spiral walk is super effective here as well. He's well thought out and well executed, unlike that other shield guy. And after him, we get to meet the kind of train walker looking laser bolts. These guys add a lot more difficulty in combat situations, because to properly dodge the laser they throw at you from the front, you have to stop in your tracks for a second so it can start shooting the laser right at your current position, and then slide under or jump over it. Trying to dash to the side doesn't work most of the time due to the long length of the laser line attack. They're mechanically sound, and spider-legged robots are a staple of every sci-fi piece of fiction ever, for good reason. They look fucking cool. Very easy positive score from me. Now, finally, it's the Warden's turn, and with him here we can also talk about the Slugger. Sluggers are the first close combat enemy we meet in the game, although the server enhancement might technically make them not count as wielding cold weapons. They don't have any form of firearm, and instead lunge at you, jumping through the air. It's an insta-death if you stand in Sluggy's path, although oddly enough, he doesn't do any kind of attack animation. Like, he doesn't lunge at you with fists held high or in some kind of kung fu kick. He just jumps, and kills you when your head hits his chest. The aerial equivalent of a T-pose, still inflicting cold, hard death on contact. After all your days of stomping Goombas, this is the Goomba that stomps you. The only problem I had with this enemy when I first saw him, which I wrote down in a note, was the fact that you couldn't parry or block his attack with your sword. You could only dodge. And as I've mentioned already, it's always best to make risky evasive play possible. And in this case, it can simply be done by adding more ways to do a certain obstacle, one that really likes slugging. But apparently, the dev team for Ghostrunner was simultaneously 1 step ahead and 10 steps behind this thread of thought. So they added the Warden. He has a katana, and in a moment of absolute ingenious, they decided to make him completely unattackable from every direction. The only way to beat him is to parry his attack with the katana and open his guard. And if it's not obvious so far from the way I've been trying to build this up, I don't like the Warden. He is everything I wouldn't like in a game like this. He breaks the flow completely. He discourages any and all kind of risky play, because risky play is literally fucking impossible against him. You just gotta sit there and wait for him to dash and slice him apart after your parry. Now he's not that hard of an opponent even when you're facing many enemies at once, but I still just find him completely pointless and very boring. He just brings my excitement down to a grinding halt. Again, this is pretty easily fixable. All I've got to do is make the Slugger's attack parryable, preferably with a cool slice him up mid-air animation, make the Warden vulnerable to normal attacks, maybe have him block your first 2 attacks to make things more interesting, but make it so he is quickly killable, and maybe even spice up his attacks a little bit by having him do a 3-slash combo. It'd be a lot of fun if you could parry all of that, but I still have the choice to dash away, like a mini easy version of the Hell boss fight. Speaking of which, let's talk about the bosses.
Oh, this is troublesome.
How do I disable it?
First, you should get on top. You could probably cut it down. It won't hold without the supporting cords.
Now you bring up the defense system.
The first of those is probably my favorite, although I utterly refuse to even attempt to say its name. I found it pretty entertaining to dodge lasers and climb a massive, constantly shifting, futuristic Tower of Sauron, spiraling around it to reach the top for some stabby action. So much so that I even replayed the fight a few times, once after first beating him, and then again after finishing the game.
Who was that?
It's your counterpart. Get after it. We need that data.
GR-74 located. Kill switch component not found. Permission to engage. Granted.
The second boss I've already spoiled. Her name is Hell, and she basically combos your ass, so you just have to parry her attacks and then get a good slash on her before she jumps to another platform and rinses and repeats. The difficulty in this one is getting used to the time between each attack so you can parry them properly, since she doesn't just repeat a one move combo. It wasn't quite the awesome Cyberpunk Samurai showdown I wanted, but it's still a pretty fun sword slashing boss fight.
Flawless.
So, do you even know what drives you, Puppet? What the endgame is? You have done nothing wrong, Puppet, but I can't let you be. As long as that demon in your head exists. You're a threat to everything I've built.
The final boss, which the game built up scene by scene from the very start, was a tad bit disappointing. Just kind of dodge some shit, and then dodge some other shit, and then you get her claw stuck, and cut the bitch's hand off, and then do it all over again. Not to say it's bad or boring, which I now realize is exactly what I implied, but it just doesn't have the same presence as the aforementioned Cyber Tower of Sauron, or even the Techno Samurai. She's just the Walmart version of Doc Ock. And honestly, I think it worked better if Tom was the final boss, and you could actually integrate it into the story pretty well, considering the oh so shocking twist at the end. Oh, right. Plot. That's a thing, isn't it?
I should have taken your head!
You're Mr. Cyber Assassin Man, a book by some dude called Whisper, who ends up actually being some other dude called the Architect, who's also apparently dead, and this is actually his AI soul thingy, and now you need to kill gender-bent Doc Ock to save the world or something. Blah blah blah. Look, I'm just gonna skip to the end. Spoiler alert. This honestly doesn't even deserve a spoiler alert, but the Architect very predictably betrays you at the end. Oh, and also, Bispe was a much cooler name than Architect.
Mindless tool.
Congratulations. You fulfilled your purpose. Mankind's greatest enemy is dead. We can now proceed to the next stage of my plan. Allow me to do the honors.
What are you doing?
Do not struggle, TR-74. I need your body, but I don't need the rest of you anymore.
What?
The rebels broke you, made you independent, and I was too weak to take back control. Too fractured, but you strengthened me, connected the remaining cybervoid nodes so I could grow. And now, it's time to take back what's mine. Bring peace back to the tower.
Mara was right about you.
Mara was wrong. Humanity must be protected, not just from the outside world, but from itself as well. And to protect fully, I need full control.
It's just so incredibly obvious. From the very moment the character Zoe gets introduced, every single interaction with either Zoe or the Architect just makes it more and more transparent. To put things in perspective, The way I wrote the script was by taking notes gradually as I played the game and then basing my writing around those notes. Some I discarded as dumb, and some became the focal point of this entire one-sided conversation. And this was the 7th note I took. So when the ending of the game treats it like an actual twist and treats your subsequent defeat of the architect in your oh so heroic mental parkour battle as an actual accomplishment, it comes off a tad cheap. Mind you, the mental parkour thing was pretty fun. All I'm saying is, it would have been even more fun if he hitched a massive fucking futuristic Tower of Sauron on you instead. Alright, I have a crush on that boss fight. Sue me. And, well, even with the predictability of everything ruining it, and how extremely unoriginal it is, the final cutscene and the conclusion of the main character's arc is still well done. If they don't bring him back for the reboot, that is. To finish off my notes on storytelling, I just have to mention how much I love the way the thread of dialogue gets split each time you die so you don't have to listen to the same things over and over again, and I also like how it has a canonical reason for only using a katana, even if it is a fairly shitty one.
Why did you program me not to use guns?
Dharma is full of technology that is all too vulnerable to accidental destruction. With a blade, there are no stray bullets, no shockwaves, no collateral damage.
Now that we're done hitting on the story, let's put our full focus on the bad mechanics, starting with puzzles, because some absolute fucking genius decided to put puzzles in a fast-paced action combat parkour game about slicing bullet and skull alike. And then the rest of these head-ass idiots decided to actually go along with that idea. Like, I don't want my Swish Swish Ninja game to demand big brain activity from me, goddammit.
This place again.
One of the problems here is how bad they are at naturally communicating the goals of puzzles and how they insist on doing it every time.
What do I do?
It's in your instincts to navigate the cyber void. In most cases, you'll just have to focus on finding the right direction.
The climb, for example, has a very simple puzzle, as there's a shape down there in a chasm that you have to replicate with some of the aforementioned move-y bits. But this is turned into a matter of focus and attention to small details due to Ghostrunner's misguided attempt to continue its theme of naturally introducing gameplay elements without naturally introducing gameplay elements. You see, it never tells you have to match the shape with the one down there, nor does it ever bring any visual attention to the chasm, which would be a great example of natural introduction. It just bets that you'd look down. Any good ninja knows people never look up or down. Ninja! I probably wouldn't be pissed about these if I put my full focus on a game when I'm playing it, but I like listening to audiobooks when playing games that are more focused on gameplay, or just have a really shitty story. And both of these things perfectly describe Ghostrunner. This isn't exactly an unusual habit, considering the very man that wrote and read the audiobook I was listening to does the same, and because of this it took me a few minutes of wandering around with no idea as to what I'm supposed to do, and looking even more like an utter retard than I already am, before I gave up and just googled what the fuck it is I'm supposed to be solving. The two circuit puzzles that show up afterwards are much better, because the purpose is clear and therefore it's easily solvable and more importantly functions as an actual puzzle. But they still break the flow of the game massively, and so I still think they should have been fully omitted. The Cyber World non-puzzle in Road to Amida made me finally realize what the purpose of all these little bits actually is, which is a bit embarrassing to be honest, because of how obvious it seems now. But they're basically being used as a little distraction to the player while Mr. Architect does an info dump. It was a bit of a facepalm moment, realizing they didn't have enough quiet moments in gameplay to properly tell the story they wanted to tell, and hence added these jerking stops to the flowing fast-paced rest of the fucking game. But anyways, it's actually a decent non-puzzle as far as those go. It's pretty much a walkthrough section based on optical illusions. It's creative, looks funky, and reminds me of Hellblade, a game way better at puzzles.
Cheer up. If you were a regular human, this would make even less sense.
The absolute worst of these Cybernote sections appears in the appropriately named Rain in Hell level.
This feels a lot like hell.
This is probably the worst puzzle witnessed by humanity since some idiot decided to invent flirting. Except it's not, it's another fucking non-puzzle. Yet it tries to disguise itself as an actual puzzle, like a wolf in sheep's skin. You stand in a room with doors, You can go through doors. Going through a door will magic you to its corresponding connected door, and then you can do that again, and again, and again, and again, and again, until you get the correct, completely random sequence of doors. I cannot overstate how utterly dull this entire affair is. The only thing keeping my sanity safe throughout this ordeal was my ever-present audiobook, God Bless Yahtzee. When I was playing through this puzzle, I assumed there must be some logical, reasonable solution here that I just wasn't seeing. And unlike last time, I couldn't consult Google due to a lack of internet connection, so I just kept agonizingly bashing my head against these goddamn doors. And, well, I was correct. The entire shtick that I figured out a bit too late due to my considerable forehead damage is that the number of lanterns above each door shows where the corresponding other door is. Yeah, pretty obvious in retrospect, but hindsight is a massive bitch. So what you have to do is look around to see which door would lead you to where the shiny MacGuffin opus you need are, see how many lanterns it has, and then jump through the door with the matching amount of lanterns. It would have been handy if Sleep Deprived me knew this on his first playthrough, but I didn't, because I wasn't paying attention to the finer details, because I was playing a simple action game with an enjoyable gameplay loop so I could have interactive entertainment to go along with my audiobook. So yes, my hatred of the puzzles is very biased and very based on my retardation, and I did over-dramatize it by calling Rain in Hell the worst puzzle since flirting, as it was fun on my subsequent playthroughs, and doing taxes is still holding that second spot spectacularly, thank you very much. But even though you can easily get through them by way of Google if you happen to get stuck, and the two non-puzzles were actually interesting, I still think they're badly presented, unnecessary, pointless, and most importantly, break the flow of everything for no reason other than a fucking info dump. Moving on to the second considerably bigger flaw, as this one isn't just me hating puzzles because I have a monkey brain with IQ in the negatives. The special powers. Dishonored would be disappointed by this mess. The first ability you get is Blink, which lets you slash and dash your way through enemies the way every Jim, Jack and Jimmy can do in anime. Guess it must have been a pretty obvious addition, this is one of the first things that comes to mind when you think katana. But it's just too complicated to be properly used in chaotic, uncalculated situations. If you're not a speedrunner who has his entire course thought out, then you're probably not going to use this one effectively. One simply doesn't have time to think of lining up two enemies in a way that the end of that line would be a relatively safe position, all the while dodging bullets and cyber goombas. And using it on one enemy always feels like a waste.
Focus energy in your left hand and then let it all out.
What?
Don't try to think. Do it. Yes.
The second ability is considerably better and also considerably worse. With Tempest, you can plain old blow your enemies away with a gust of wind that kills them dead. And for some extra airbender swag, you can deflect projectiles and throw them back or whatever. Look, the problem here is, the ability is just too good. It's less like a crucial tool in your toolbox to deal with the obstacles the game puts in your path, and more like a magic card that lets you off a particularly troublesome enemy and basically skip the bit where you have to deal with them. Of course, there's actually more strategy to it. It isn't fucking mobile game gems, but it's just uncomfortably close. And perhaps more importantly, Tempest completely replaces Blink by being 1,000 times easier to use and therefore makes Blink utterly useless. And the third ability proves this to be a theme.
You've been asking for a ranged attack. Here it is.
Surge is yet another straight out of anime classic, as it lets you throw a big white slash of blade energy. Script note here, I wrote that with alternating caps. Similar to what happened before, Surge just replaces Tempest due to having a wider area of effect and so makes Ghostrunner wind bending completely useless as well. The situation is slightly better here, as Tempest still has projectile deflection, but no one fucking uses that. Ever. Or well, at least I don't. The last ability, however, is a bit odd.
Now to try it out. Find their center. Let the implants speak to you. Good.
Overlord allows you to turn an enemy into an ally for a short amount of time, like the purple mushroom things from Plants vs Zombies, but less permanent and also less useful. Sure, it can do some damage, but can also just make a useless practice dummy that gets shot to bits in seconds. It was a bit hard initially to properly phrase what I think is so incredibly off about Overlord. It should be a good ability, is a good ability in many games, but I just never end up using it. But I think I've got it now. It's about the pacing, the mystical magical word, pacing. Overlord would be a good ability in any game that gives you the option of stealth, or allows you to choose how crazy you want a particular encounter to be. But in Ghostrunner, where everything is full throttle all the time, it just doesn't work that well, or work at all, really. It's theoretically useful and practically useless. Its biggest use, in fact, is as a plot device, which makes the big twist at the end oh so much more predictable.
You're worse than Mara.
What are you talking about?
She sabotaged the Ghostrunners. You did it to everyone.
It's a tool. If you don't like it, don't use it.
Finally, let's talk about the last of the flaws I mentioned, upgrades. We had some problems with uselessness in the previous two subjects, and although the upgrades are as useful as can be, I'm gonna be perfectly honest here. I didn't use them at all, not even once. It just never gives you a reason to, really. They aren't an actual gameplay element, they're glorified Easter eggs, because someone thought making Easter eggs that genuinely make your powers simply better was a good idea. The reason I never used them was because when I found the first one, which gives you a little intro to upgrades, I thought, I'll just deal with this when I come across another one, and I never did. But honestly, I can't diss them too much, because I imagine these will also be adding quite a lot of spice to the speedrunning experience, since they have to figure out what exact combination of upgrades would help them get the best time, and if it's worth it to spend a valuable second or two to switch mid-run. So I'm just gonna tell you to ignore them for now and move on with your business. Your business being the dismemberment of the variety of available enemies. Which reminds me, there's still a lot of those we haven't talked about. So let's just go through that list, shall we? God, that's such a horrible transition. I apologize. The sniper is less of an actual enemy and more of an environmental obstacle. He shows up for a few bits during one of the missions and then goes away afterwards. It's a kind of obvious good idea that's been very well executed. You just jump around the map trying to make sure he doesn't 360 MLG ninja flip no-scope your ass while you sneak up on his ass. Look, I'm not gay for the sniper, okay, but I quite enjoyed these sections as they reminded me of the Cyclops monster from the story about my uncle. But, well, that's a story for another time. The drones are an interesting idea, but in my opinion suffer from the same problem as Overlord. They're basically floating pea shooters that lazily throw a slug at you every few seconds, because the actual purpose is to let you do air skating by jumping up on them. And you can even crash them into the ground and blow up your enemies while doing it. It's a pretty good idea for an enemy, but as I mentioned before, Ghostrunner is about careful pre-calculation and instinct gained through repeated deaths. While these drones would be a pretty nice idea in a more chaotic game with randomized spawns, which I mentioned already, in Ghostrunner they end up being the cool thing you never quite get to do except when it's handed to you on a golden platter. Speaking of good but not particularly well implemented ideas, the crawlers. Explodey bomb strap things. Muslims, if you would. I'm gonna get cancelled for that one, aren't I? These little fellas are unfightable, pretty much. You get too close and they go boom. The way the game uses them, and the way they should be used, is for interesting, fast-paced escape from the horde sections. The first slight issue comes in the familiar form of bad natural introduction. If you were to want to communicate to a player that they should be running from this particular enemy, then you might put them in a big road or tunnel with two directions. Show them the big bad zombies at their back and the path to survival at the front. And then you have a chase section. Clean and easy. A good example of this would be the way Dying Light does pretty much exactly what I described. You can add tension to this sort of thing by having enemies come up and just spill from the side, to show the player how close their doom is, and just generally make it more cinematic. Again, exactly what Dying Light does. But in Ghostrunner, your first run in with Clash of Clans wall breakers is when they spill from the front, so it takes you 1 or 2 deaths to figure out you aren't supposed to mow these guys down and should be trying to run instead. Fight or flight, as it were. Not really a big problem, but it does show a lack of attention to detail. This is all made worse by the fact that the game refuses to use dialogue to egg you into what you're supposed to be doing. Of course, natural introduction is better, but an unnatural introduction is still preferable to no introduction at all. I'd complain about the annoying little section where I had no idea where to go right after escaping from these guys, and how I had to keep dodging crawlers and dragging them behind me around the map whilst trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. But that actually reminded me of Call of Duty Zombies, fond memories, so I'll let it slide. Cloners, or Splitters, which is the official name, I think. I'd make a Clone Wars reference, but I'm not a Star Wars kind of nerd, so just take some random LEGO Star Wars footage instead. The Splitter isn't like the drones or crawlers. The Splitter is in no way a badly executed or misused, yet still good idea. It's dumb. It's fucking dumb. An utterly retarded idea. The Splitter, true to its namesake, splits itself into clones. The problem is the fact that the bullets the clones shoot are actually non-existent. They pass through you. Some absolute fucking Einstein decided to add fake bullets in a game where the main fucking mechanic is dodging bullets. A game that trains your instincts to dodge each and every projectile you see. The clones fucking swarm you with a hail of their illusion shots. And of course, the real bullets hiding between the fakes, so you can't just ignore them, because you get your brains blown out. It gets better if you realize you can highlight the real Splitter by holding shift. I say if, because the game never bloody tells you that, and I think we've well established Ghostrunner has communication issues by now. Pretty much your high school girlfriend that expects you to understand everything she's thinking without her fucking saying it. So what you need to do is focus on where all the clones are, identify the real one, focus on him, dodge his bullets, get close and cut his head off. That'd be fine if you only have to fight the Splitter and the Splitter alone in any given area, but that's obviously not the case, so it's fucking dumb, and stupid, and dumb, and also really stupid. But honestly, since they only come in at the very end of the game, and so you don't have to deal with them much, they aren't that big of a problem. And finally, we have the teleporters. These guys are kind of good, naturally. They have a simple concept, you know, they teleport, self-explanatory, a good implementation, a fantastic design, they annoy you into coming up with a way to deal with them, and they also actually make using the overload power fun. Kind of. I suppose the only major mechanic that I haven't discussed yet is the power-ups. You have 2 of those, the slow-mo power-up and the shuriken power-up. Both are rather self-explanatory. The slow-mo slows down time, and the shuriken is basically this game's version of Mario's flower. We've been comparing this to the Mario games a lot, haven't we? But I think these two have the same problem as, well, everything else. Good idea, not the best implementation. The slow-mo time mechanics are mostly used in an extremely cliche way. Big ass fans. The type that Linus would put in a budget build. Except instead of killing your wallet, they kill you. These are a video game standard, really, and I don't mind the fact that it's cliche, I just don't like how they mostly ignored all the creative ways that time mechanics could be used. There are some sections where you use the slow-mo power-up to dodge a hail of enemy bullets or to gain an edge in combat, but they're mostly used as yet another non-puzzle. That doesn't even sound like a word to me anymore. I suppose it never was. The worst example of this would be the death blow bit, but there is no way to get the timing right unless you just take blind shots in the dark until you die enough times to do it correctly. They could have used this power up in a parkour section where you have to speed through a whole firing squad, but they did this instead. Not really worth complaining about, but I like complaining. But the ninja adaptation of Mario's flower is a bit more to my liking. The way these are used is with stationary targets that you have to hit in quick succession to open up whatever door they happen to be connected to. Although I still think it should have been used more to give you an edge in specifically designed combat scenarios, just like the time mechanics, I enjoyed the process of figuring out a parkour route that lets me hit all the switches and then get to the open door fast enough before it closes. Right then, only a few more minor notes left in my notepad, and they're all about bugs. So since we are going to be talking about bugs, I must put a footnote here saying that I actually played an older version of the game, because I couldn't update due to the aforementioned lack of internet connection. Basically, most of these issues are probably fixed, and so most of this section is probably pointless. There is a danger warning function that really becomes important in the later missions. When you're surrounded on all sides and can't memorize every enemy's position, it becomes necessary for the game to give you a bit of a warning for when an enemy is about to shoot at you. All fine and well so far, and it's commendable that they playtested and thought of this, but the problem comes in when it decides to bug out. This happened to me 2 times, where it showed me a false warning, though I'm not certain if I can find the footage for that, so you might need to just take my word for it. Very minor bug, but it is very disorienting. Another small problem I had was with crashes. 2 of them, again. That seems to be my unlucky number for today. The first time really was a small problem, just reboot the game and continue on from where I was. What I didn't notice then, having just finished a mission and starting a new one, was that the game has no progress saving if you're in the middle of a mission. Of course you have autosaves for when you die, it would be unplayable otherwise, but you can close Ghostrunner in the middle of a mission and have the option to continue. The missions are pretty small for the most part, so you can walk around it, but this did make the crashes pretty annoying, and it's just such an easily fixable issue, regardless of crashes, so I feel the need to include it in the review. I noticed more problems with the autosaves on the second crash. You see, I'd run through almost the entire mission, and I'd noticed a particularly difficult bit where I had to deal with 2 areas of enemies without an autosave between them. The game crashed, and I had to do the whole mission again, and this time I noticed that there was an autosave between those 2 areas. Funny that. Now, you would think having to repeat an entire mission would make you very mad, and I was mad at first, but this is actually one of the best bits about the game. Something I had noticed but probably wouldn't have tried for myself if it weren't for the crash. The massive speedrunning potential of this goddamn game. I had so much fun just breezing through the enemies that gave me such trouble the first time around, and coming up with better ways to deal with some of them made me sure I'd be even better the next time around. So with this discovery, after finishing the game, I decided to speedrun level 1. I intentionally didn't check the leaderboards to see what record I could personally accomplish before that. After much fiddling and faddling and coming up with the quickest way to move through the obstacles and dying bad deaths many times, I finally brought it down to 2 minutes. I then went onto YouTube to watch a man fucking rocket off the map, glitch his way into some wall and finish it all in 16 seconds. That glitch has actually been fixed, and so that speedrun is now disqualified, but I must admit it was fucking hilarious.
Ich hab einen Weltrekord auf. Ich hab den Weltrekord.
But I had a lot more fun going onto speedrun.com, looking away from the sus ads it was showing me, and seeing what the approved world record speedrun for that mission is. It was fascinating to see the process I was struggling to perfect being taken to such extremes of mastery. The differences in approach were immediately obvious, as I'd yet to even consider not killing enemies I didn't have to kill and simply ignoring them. The speedrunner also had perfected the slide and dash trick, so they were just gliding across the whole map beautifully. Watching that, after having attempted it for an hour or 2 myself, was so fucking satisfying. It also made me want to perfect the game to such a degree myself. That's some rather serious heavy replayability, because Ghostrunner is very speedrun optimized. With the way the levels are split up and how it tells you your time whenever you finish one, it's obvious that the developers definitely had the speedrunning potential in mind whilst making the game. And with that, combined with the pacing and the gameplay, I expect there to be a small but dedicated speedrunning community for this game, which I hope really grows as the game gets more attention. Which I really hope grows, whatever. Long story made short, Ghostrunner is a game with a fantastic, well thought out basic gameplay loop that has some bigger flaws but is mostly held back by its smaller imperfections. A diamond in the rough that just needs a little bit of spit and polish. Maybe a little bit more than a little bit of spit and polish. It's also very accurately named.
Ghostrunners have adaptive cyber camouflage, surveillance cameras, motion sensors, body scanners. They don't see. That's why you were called Ghostrunners.
If you quote Yahtzee, it's a game about running and making things dead. Feels a bit weird to quote his review on a game I played whilst listening to his audiobook, but I really do like quoting Yahtzee.
Queefing robo-vaginas under our armpits that function as thrusters.
I guess I'd recommend both the game and the audiobook, that is. And if I were in the practice of giving scores, I'd rank them both as a 7. I'd also recommend Yahtzee's review. He does a much better job of railing on about the shitty plot than I did.
But forget about the plot. The writers did the instant the first draft was turned in.
Although I do disagree with them about the boss fights and all that. I just realized this entire video makes me sound like a Yahtzee sim. But yeah, I guess we're done here for now. See you later, hopefully. If I'm not too lazy. And goodbye. Oh, hi, hello again. Hope you enjoyed the music. It must be a tad awkward, considering I'm saying hi like a minute after saying bye, but that's not the case in my timeline. I'm writing this about, let's say, 4 months after writing the rest of the script. It didn't actually take me 4 full months to edit it. There was a lot of procrastination involved, and school kicking my ass, and a lot of adapting. For example, I live in an apartment right next to a big road, I suppose, and our walls happen to be very, very thin, so we kind of get major driving noises at all times. And I don't have the space to make a recording booth, not even a big enough closet, so I had to stay up until 3 AM to record most of the voiceover. And then I had to re-record a lot of that while editing it because of audio clipping, which made me mess around with the Fairlight tab a bit more until I realized the car sounds were insignificant in the first place and easily done away with using noise suppression. Yeah, awkward. All those sleepless nights were for nothing. And because of me being sleep deprived, my delivery is extremely odd in some sections. I go from excited and awake to utterly dead inside and sleepy, and I keep stressing the wrong syllables on everything, so even more re-recording. But that turned into an even bigger pain in the ass, because whenever I turn on the mic to start doing it, all the flaws in the script kept popping up and staring me in the face, so a lot of rewriting ensued. Which made me realize just how many subjects I forgot to talk about, and how many I babble on about for too long, and just generally how garbage my script is. I mean, I did write it 4 months ago, maybe 5, and I didn't know shit about writing back then. I just completely forgot to talk about the music, or the voice acting.
The traitors are dead, but their supporters still walk among us.
Or the Rubik's Cube parkour section where everything keeps rotating, which I actually loved a lot, or how visually different each level looks. Serious props for that last one actually, the environmental design is pretty great throughout. I also forgot to discuss the turrets and the jump power up, but then that made me realize I don't need to rattle on about every little thing, that I should be focusing on the important subjects rather than spending a whole 2 minutes on bugs that don't even matter because they've probably been fixed already. I considered deleting that section completely, but I decided it's actually better to keep it in, as I'm kind of sick of this trend of games releasing half finished. I'll probably do the same if I ever do another game review here. And, you know, it was a good excuse for showing you some cute moths. Moths. And all that is just the flaws I noticed, which is a bit of a daunting idea. I'd appreciate it if you tell me about any others I missed in the comments below. God, I already sound like a YouTuber. Speaking of which, I'm gonna end this with a quick thank you to Internet Shaquille. I was about to scrap this project after I noticed all the flaws in the script and how a lot of the humor and meaning just falls flat because I wasn't quite as good at English back then. But I saw this little short he uploaded, where he basically screams at you to go post that embarrassing first project, and that made me finally start the editing process. Saying that kind of helped with embracing creative laziness, and killing the urge to spend hours finding footage for a level I spent like 5 seconds talking about. Anyways, another special thanks to Blue the Cloud for being my living podcast as I worked on this chunkster, and also another special thanks to Suffle for the Overwatch clips, and also just being Suffle. His channel is in the description. Now, if you excuse me, I have to figure out how Photoshop works to make a thumbnail, and also what to name the video. Goodbye again!